That's on my to-do list for tomorrow to phone down there and meet.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting, Taber Town Council for March 11th, 2019. If I could call the meeting to order, please, and ask for an adoption of the agenda. Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item number 3, adoption of the minutes. Item 3.1, minutes of regular meeting of Council, February 25th, 2019. Mr. Armfield.
Yeah, first up is the February 25th meeting minutes for Council's consideration. Any amendments or changes, please let us know.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns? Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, I can make the motion that Council adopts the minutes of the regular meeting of Council held February 25th, 2019 as presented.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Businesses arise from the minutes. There are none. Item 5, bylaws. There are none. Item 6. Item 6.1, community grants program policy. Mr. Armfield.
Yeah, the first matter of substance that we have for Council this afternoon is a discussion that's coming out of the Rec Board for a request to amend the community grant policy and procedure that we have in place. And I'm going to turn it over actually to Ms. Phillips and Danielle from the Rec Board to have a discussion about this with Council, please.
So just for a little history, in 2018 the community grants policy was changed so that money or cash donations were no longer eligible under the program, and the current policy states that ineligible applications will then go directly to Council. At the January Rec Board meeting, another motion was made that requested that the policy be further amended to give Rec Board final authority. So once a grant was ineligible through the Rec Board, it was just done, and if a group wanted to apply directly to Council, it would be a separate application. So administration is requesting just discussion around this policy with some direction on how to deal with ineligible grant applications to see if a change does need to be, further changes need to be made to the policy.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Comments? None whatsoever. Ms. Hanson, do you have something to add to that as well from the Recreation perspective, Recreation Board perspective?
The Rec Board was just wondering, so right now we have in the policy that past the deadline, it goes straight to Council. What happens if there's still funds available? Does it come to Rec Board, or is it once the funds are all used up, then does it go to Council? That was my only concern and question.
All right, I'll ask for Mr. Armfield for some support on that from your perspective.
Yeah, and I'm going to defer to Ms. Phillips on the actual technicalities of how this is operated. I think we have the discretion after that, after the end of the year. I guess I shouldn't answer it if you're willing to. Ms. Phillips, go ahead.
From what I understand, after October, that's the deadline for our grants, and at this point no further applications are considered, and I guess that's how where we're interpreting the policy. So that's part of the question, is if there was still funds available, such as the applications that came in late to the last Council meeting, could those be considered by the Rec Board? Should we change the policy to that effect, or does it need to be because our deadline is October, so we only accept, as the Rec Board, they only accept the applications up to that date.
Correct. So again, Mr. Armfield, I'll just ask that question of yourself. Do you see something problematic with that scenario, or is that something Council should be prepared to deal with as well?
Well, in my interpretation, the Rec Board is asked to be the final authority, so to speak, on the matters of distribution of this community grant application. Like, that's how I interpret the message that is being sent to council from the rec board. It's awfully challenging to prevent somebody from coming to council to make a request for funding at any point in time. So if you're asking me for some advice, I think it's council should be cautioned against creating a policy that states there will be no more support provided to anybody looking for some recreational support, whether there's money left or whether there isn't any money left. It's not, I would say, under the democratic process and the transparent process that I think this council tries to undertake, to say that somebody can't approach council to ask for funding if they missed an arbitrary deadline set in October. I think at any point in time, council can make a decision to support somebody looking for some rec board funding. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't change the policy to send it back to the rec board for the rec board's consideration, but that would be something that would have to go through a policy change to allow for that, or council could take it on and make the decision themselves whether there was funding left or not. There's always an option for council to pull money out of an operating reserve or council discretionary fund to support anything that comes forward.
All right, thank you. I'm just wondering, Mr. Armfeldt, if there's something we can do that's just allowing a little more flexibility. So if there's the what if case scenario, for an example, a special event that, I'll just use a one horse town as an example. We didn't know we were going to get that event. That was a great thing for the community and it worked out well all the way around. But should there be some group that was, well, there was different local groups were part of that, but again, should there be a group that now is going to support that or be part of that and looking for some help for some waivers, and we've passed the deadline, then how do we deal with something like that? Special event, unforeseen, you know what I'm getting at?
Then doesn't that go straight to council?
Well, this is the point, though. That's part of this dilemma, right?
Yeah, and if you're looking for me for some further context, it's tough for me to make a decision that ultimately is the rec board's. It's the flavor of the rec board ultimately, whether they want to make a decision at the end of a year for the next year and say, okay, we're not opening this book again. If we are making decisions for 2019 at the end of 2018. We recommend on who we think is deserving of support. We make that decision, and then the rec board actually is pulled out of that decision-making process, and anybody that's past the October deadline has to come to council for support. Alternatively, if it's the rec board's desire or council's desire to further engage them in making a recommendation, then we could write that up in the policy and have it that if you are late, then you are going back to the rec board. However, then there's no real onus on the applicant to make sure they get their application in by October. So, and that is the point, to try and set a deadline so we do these things in a specific process.
Yeah, I understand that from your perspective that way, Mr. Armfeldt. I guess I'm just a little worried about the what if scenario, like I'm trying to explain my end. And so do we make it completely rec board oriented only, or do we just allow a little bit of flexibility? That's what I'm getting at.
I think that's almost impossible.
Yeah.
You've got a question from a counselor there, but I almost think that's impossible to say that no, we are going to slam the door at the end of October and deny any more rec board support or any support for somebody that's doing something that's a one-off, because anybody always has the chance to come to council and make their claim.
Correct. Councillor Beckery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was not able to attend the last rec board meeting, so I don't know completely the rationale behind this request or this motion that was passed by the rec board. I do know one thing. We set dates all the time, and in this particular case, because the date's October, and the $25,000 allocated by council to the rec board to use. It so happened, of course, that this year there was a few $1,000s left over, and at the last meeting, council decided to give some grants to two groups. I think this works out well. I don't see the need to necessarily amend this community grants program. I think it's worked quite well so far, and I think, like Mr. Armfeld just said, it is still up to council to decide to grant waivers or grant some money to some groups. The democratic process, what it is, I guess, this is the place, this is where the buck stops. So I think we should leave it as it is. Thank you.
Councilor Strauss.
Your Worship, we allocate $25,000 to the rec board for this program, and I think it should be up to them to utilize that money. If a secondary request comes in, it should go to them for approval rather than come back to us, because that's what we have it there for. We have it there for them for a grant program. And if the money's not all used up and somebody comes forward, it should go through the Recreation Department. It should go through that program. It shouldn't come to council here. And this is why we set it up this way, is so that these tasks would be dealt with by the Recreation Board.
Isn't it the case, to Ms. Hanson or Ms. Phillips, that in most cases, most years, there's generally speaking more asks than there is money available? So I'm saying, like this year, there was more money available than us, but there's usually more asks than money available. That's what I'm getting at. So yeah, so you can support 25 generally, and usually you have 30 kind of thing. So 5 don't get it because we're out of money. So this is kind of an unusual year. Councilor Becker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't agree with Councilor Strovo's rationale regarding this request. I think that dates are set for a reason, and like Mr. Armfeld just said, if you don't give an incentive to groups to apply for grants before a set deadline, you might as well throw a deadline out.
Councilor Thames.
At the rec board meeting was a discussion as to which way we go. Do we, if we have this, if there's late ones, how do we deal with it? And from the rec board perspective, we have a deadline in October. So if you haven't come to us, rec board automatically is going to say, no, you need to go to council because you're past the deadline, because we as a rec board have a deadline. And the question and the concern at the time was, should the rec board be involved with these requests after the fact? And I think there's some merit to it. It's also some merit to it that if somebody comes with a late request and you want to be on for next year, that's what we want. But the rec board was not saying that council cannot grant further requests after the fact. It's just, where should we be going as a rec board? Should we be involved with these late applications or not? We're looking for direction from council as a rec board, as should we be able to entertain these late requests ourselves, or because our deadline is October, are they automatically going to council? That's the clarification we're looking for. And my personal opinion is, if we have a deadline of October, that's what we as a rec board need to stick to, because then we're going to be open to it every meeting. So from a rec board perspective, we would like to see it as, here's the October deadline. Anything after that is going to council, but we'd just like to be involved and know what's going on as a rec board.
All right. Anything else? I think I would also agree with Councilor Becker and Councilor Thames that the deadline set up for clarification and or consistency with the rec board at the rec board level. So I don't know that it's such a problem as was the case this year, that we happen to have some monies left over, and a couple of groups did come to council asking for that possibility, knowing there's no guarantees that that's going to happen anyway. So it's worked out just fine. So all things considered, I don't know that that's a real problem. Anything else, Councilor Firth?
Mr. Mayor, just a comment. The only problem with things coming in, requests coming in after the deadline coming to council, is we don't necessarily have the context. The rec board looks at the waivers as a group, so they can say, okay, so 2 schools are looking for a waiver, we can give them an equal amount. But when we're getting it, we're getting them as a one-off, so we don't necessarily know. And most of the time, if it's a valid request, we'll grant it, but there may be some thought that the rec board puts into it that we're not privy to. So then when things come to us, we don't necessarily have that information.
That's a good point, Councillor Firth. I would agree with that as a possibility. But like I said, the biggest example here is, though, in most cases, all the asks are covered, or so the total amounts for the asks are covered, and then anything beyond that is not covered because of, like I say, we're out of money. So, like I said, this was a rather unusual year in that capacity. And so, any other questions, Councillor Becker?
Your Worship. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Strauss.
Your Worship, perhaps, and you know, I mean, we have a rec board that makes decisions, and perhaps we need to give them a little more cash so that they have a little bit of a slush fund. In the 6 years that I've been on council, it seems like we get a couple of requests every year for, you know, $600 and some here, $1,000 there. So why not leave that with the rec board and let them make those decisions? Give them a bit of a slush fund so that they can make it. Why should we as council deal with those requests when we have a rec board set up to look after that? It's been going on for 6 years. Let's empower them to do more and look after it.
Councillor Brown?
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is they didn't use their $25,000 this year, so we didn't really have a slush fund. I like the idea if the rec board hits $25,000, then it comes to council. But you have the October deadline. I think we should stick to that. If there's a special case, of course, it can always come to council. So I really don't see the need to change much of what we have here. So,
Councillor Towns.
The policy we have with the October deadline puts the onus on the user groups to come and be prepared. And I think from the rec board perspective, if people show up with their requests and they're prepared and they have their backing, the rec board can deal with it. And anything over and above that, I truly do believe has to come back to council, because it's just going to become onerous on the rec board. And if we do nothing, make no changes to community grants program, we're doing exactly what we're doing now. In October, the rec board spent their money. Whether they spend $20,000 or $24,999, that's the rec board. That's the budget they have. That's what they do. Anything over and above that has to come to council. And it puts onuses on the user groups to also be prepared. We are thinking about doing this. We would like a community grant. Anything else, I think, has to come to council because it's over and above. And if we make no changes to the policy, at least the rec board knows what they're doing. Here's the budget. Here's the people coming. And after October, you are going to council because we've dealt with our deadlines done. And if we make no changes, that's what we're doing.
All right, Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to test the waters and make a motion.
All right.
I'll move that council not consider amending Section 9 of the Community Grants Program.
All right. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. On to item 6.2, tractor procurement. Mr. Arpo.
Yeah, I'm going to call Ms. Parsons up and possibly Mr. Shearer. This is we have purchased this tractor through a bit of a different process through the Rural Municipalities Association, and I think before we actually get into the evaluation of the tender, I think Ms. Parsons is going to discuss a little bit about the process that we undertook to get to this point.
All right, thank you, Ms. Parsons.
Councilors, good afternoon. So it's my understanding that this process has not been utilized in the past with council, so I thought I would give you a bit of an overview. The Rural Municipalities Association, to which the town of Taber belongs, has a trade division. In and amongst that trade division, there are a number of different commodity groups and categories and ways of purchasing items. This particular tractor is part of the capital procurement program, capital purchasing program. There are a number of different types of standing offers in the trade division, which everything from safety to construction equipment to industrial supplies to plumbing supplies, paints, and etc. And there's a number of different ways and processes to take advantage of the program. What ends up happening is the Rural Municipalities Association, on behalf of the municipalities who are part of that membership, issue tenders and RFPs for different commodity groups to get, it's really, we take advantage of pricing based on volumes then through other municipalities as well. So in the case of the capital purchasing program, what we're required to do is to post a notice of planned procurement on the Alberta Purchasing Connection website, and that allows then all the different vendors who are part of the trade program to be aware of that, and then we can approach one of the vendors who are on the approved supplier list as part of this trade directory, and we ask for a quote, and they give us the pricing based on the capital purchasing program and the municipality discount as a result of those tenders and RFPs. So for us to take advantage of it, what it does for us, in essence, is it allows us to look at the vendors and the types of manufacturers and equipment that we want to utilize, and we can take advantage of the pricing without having to go and follow and waste more money actually in the administrative process to put out another RFP or tender and end up with the same pricing or perhaps not as good a pricing.
Councillor Bickering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Parsons. This seems like an excellent program to me. I guess my question would be, though, are all the local dealers eligible under this capital procurement program? So, for example, the John Deere dealer in Tabor, was it eligible to bid on this particular product?
They are eligible to, so all vendors actually are eligible to participate in the trade program. They may not have been successful in terms of the capital purchasing program for this particular tender. And they put them out, they have varying different cycles on the different commodity groups. So for capital equipment, it could be every 3 years, every 5 years, and it varies. So they would have had an opportunity to bid? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Towns?
It's actually not true, Mr. Councillor Beckering. That's not how that program works. The program through the RMA, which is through the AUMA and the AADMC, when they combined their purchasing program, became the RMA. And the capital purchasing program, they go to vendors. In this case, John Deere, Case, all the vendors, and they are asked to participate in what their level of discount will be. So it is not that all vendors are eligible. All vendors have the opportunity to join that program and to give a prescribed discount rate. So, that being said, that's how that program works. And they have it from toilet paper to paper towels to cleaning supplies to hose to tractors to everything that's available through the RMA. But the vendor needs to go to the RMA with a set up discount, a prescribed discount. So, and they give that to the vendor, to the RMA. So it's a certain number that's given as a discount. And so not all vendors choose to join that program. Not all vendors choose to participate in that program.
But they are eligible.
No, they're not. Local tractor dealer, if John Deere, we're going to use the Western tractor dealer here in town, if John Deere decides not to join the RMA program and do this, thus Green Power is not eligible because they don't have the discount structure from, and they go to the major manufacturers in the capital purchasing. It's not a select vendor. It's not a select dealership. It's not this. It's mostly done through the major manufacturers. It's a program I'm well aware of because I use it lots. And the difference is, instead of us going out for tender, here's the prescribed discount, this is what we are going to get from that manufacturer. So we can go to a manufacturer, we don't have to tender, the discount is prescribed, here's what we're giving the RMA. And whether this government discount from this manufacturer is 20% or 17%, they go to the RMA and say, we're going to give you 25 across the board, and that's the end of the discussion. So it's not really a tender. It's just a purchasing agreement with a prescribed discount, is how that program works. And my question would be, when we do this, do we invite all of the local, in this case we're tendering a tractor or purchasing a tractor, do we invite all of the local dealers via letter or a phone call that this is actually on the APC, on the Alberta Purchasing Connection, and that our intent is to use the RMA program so that they have the ability to go to their manufacturer and say, we want to do this through the program, and that is doable. But do we invite them, or do we just post it on the APC? Because the APC is page after page after page on that screen every day of what's out there from every municipality, everybody purchasing through the APC. And my concern is that the local vendors are actually not informed that we're doing this. That we posted on the APC, but we do not inform them, and that's my single biggest concern. So if we have approached our vendors, told them this is what we're doing, and we're going to go through the RMA, then I could support this. If we have not done this, I don't think it's the right thing for us to be doing.
So the response to your question is, do we contact them? No, we do not. Do they have the ability to register on APC and get notifications by commodity groups? Yes, they do. We don't contact, when we put out an RFP or a tender, we don't contact any vendors and say, by the way, this is there, this is listed, this is here. We don't send it to them individually. They all have equal opportunity to subscribe to the APC website, subscribe to the Town of Taber website, and be made aware when there is something that is posted. Do we do that? No, we don't contact them directly.
Right, Councillor Chavez.
Yes, Your Worship. I struggle with this as well, because we've got one bid, one quote here. I mean, it may be very well be a good quote, but what if I'm John Deere and I'm overstocked on a bunch of these tractors, and I can cut you a better deal than that? Does that put them out of the ring then? I mean, are we taking a price that there may be a better price out there? I'm just uncomfortable with this, with just one bid. I mean, it's not a case of toilet paper we're buying here. It's a tractor, and dealers, sometimes they get overstocked on tractors, or somebody refuses to buy one after ordering it or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different situations. I'm not totally comfortable with this process. I think it cuts out local dealerships from the bidding process.
Mr. Renfro.
So there's been a couple of items raised here. I'll speak to one, that this was actually originally Council's direction for us to start using this program, and so we have started utilizing this program, and we've brought you this as per Council's direction to start utilizing this process. And just that being stated. The second one is that Ms. Parsons brought up an item that I queued into, is that any of the local businesses could register to find out when this goes on our website. So we crossed this bridge about 2 years ago when we started procuring things simply electronically and not phoning to solicit bids from local vendors. We made all the local vendors aware that we were changing our process. They all got notified of that, and that they all had the opportunity then to register with our website. And then when something, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Ms. Parsons, that we did not do this in this case, or we did, that when this hits our website, then the local vendor would actually get notified via email if they had gone in and registered, like we gave everybody the opportunity to do a couple of years ago. They would actually then get notified that the town is looking for X. All right, so if the situation came up a couple of years ago with a vehicle, that we had tendered for a vehicle, and we had only received one quote on that vehicle from one automobile sales firm in town, and the other two sales firm felt that they were slighted because we hadn't notified them of the change in the process. So at that time, I think we went fairly above and beyond to make the local vendors aware that we were changing the process, and if they wanted to be identified when we were looking to buy something, that they had to go and register on our site. And then when something came out, whether it was toilet paper or tools or whatever, they would immediately become notified that we're looking for something. The town of Taber is looking for something. You might want to make yourself aware of this because you might want to consider bidding on it. So, Ms. Parsons, is that in my understanding correct on this?
So I'm not sure about the communication that happened. That was before my time here. What I am aware of is that this program requests that we post a notice of planned procurement on the APC website, which we have done. We did not post it on the local website, on our town's website.
Okay, so we didn't do that. So we only posted on APC. Okay.
Excuse me. All right, anything else? Councillor Thames.
So then the assurance for our local dealers is if they have registered and we have gone to see them, this is the process we are going to do. And we have informed our local dealerships, whether it's car dealerships, tractor dealerships, or whoever we purchase from. If we've informed them this is the process we're doing, and we put this on there, they get a notification that this is what the town is doing? Or is it just because that certain commodity group is going to get a notification? Do the local vendors absolutely get a notification?
In my understanding, the way the Alberta Purchasing Connection website works is that you can apply for notifications based on commodity groups. So if they're registered on the APC to get notifications on capital purchases, on tractors, on construction equipment, on boats, whatever it is, they would get a notification when that happens. My understanding is that it works by commodity group.
It's commodity group, not a location.
That's correct.
And for council's consideration, that's how the Northwest trade, what's the legislation?
West Treaty, New West Trade
Agreement. The New West Trade Agreement?
Yes.
The New West Trade Agreement operates based off of commodity, not location. And that's what we are bound by. We are bound by commodity. We are not bound legislatively by location, which is the challenge.
Right. Well, with everything that's discussed here today and all things considered, it sounds to me that everyone's on an equal playing field. Everyone has had that opportunity. So if they have chosen not to register for whatever reason, I guess that's up to them.
Yeah, having said that, I would agree with you. Having said that, I also respect what Councillor Thames has to say in terms of local vendors and
right.
Councillor Strollhouse as well. I mean, like I say, I've only been here a year. I would like to spend some time with some of the local vendors to encourage them to work with the RMA, because I think there's also other advantages for them in lots of ways.
You know, there's a possibility with people leaving and new people hired may not be totally up on what's happening that way. So all things considered, that may not be fair and reasonable for anybody new coming in, as an example. So maybe it's not a bad idea to reiterate that to the businesses, that this is what's happening and what's the process involved there. I also understand Councillor Thames' concerns there, but I guess particularly we're governed by that New West Trade Agreement. That makes it extra difficult because that's what the expectations are. That's what we have to follow, right?
Yeah, essentially we would be in conflict with that legislation if Ms. Parsons was to phone any specific vendor and say, hey, we are putting this up on the board, you might want to check it out. That would actually be in conflict with that legislation. The purity of the intent is to keep the procurement process absolutely pure from the perspective of us picking a favorite of who we might want to buy from. And whether they're in Calgary or Edmonton or Taber, that legislation is clear, is that we stay out of making choices of who gets a notice and who doesn't.
Councillor Thames.
That being said, Corey, through the RMA program, you have the exact same ability to have a preferred vendor. You may go to a preferred vendor and say, this is what we're buying. We are buying a Case tractor, we're buying a John Deere tractor, we're buying this. You have the ability through that RMA program to do exactly the same thing, to pick a preferred vendor. So the clarity that we're going to be in conflict with the trade agreement, through the RMA program, you can do exactly the same thing. And if you read through this, it's even highlighted, you know, as a preferred vendor, our preferred vendor. You go to your preferred vendor through the RMA program. So if it's a conflict for the trade agreement, it's a conflict going through this program.
No, I would disagree, because those vendors have been pre-qualified through the RMA process. They've been pre-qualified through RMA to allow them to be eligible to have that preferred vendor status, if that's what you want to call it. So that's why, that's the benefit of the program. The RMA has done that has jumped through that legislative hurdle on the town's behalf. So that's why the opportunity now exists for this to take place as it's taking place. Because the RMA has essentially done our legwork.
All right, anything else? Councillor Beckering?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm somewhat confused, that's for sure. And I still think this is probably an excellent program. You know, I like to have the assurance from administration. I know Mr. Armfeld said it, that 2 years ago, all vendors were contacted regarding this possibility of a new program. And by way of email or letter, or I need some assurance here that all vendors in Taber were contacted of the new program being instituted by the town of Taber. Can we do that?
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Beckering, quite impossible to do that, because you're asking for something that we cannot prove that all vendors, you know, that are in the town of Taber today were made aware that we were going down this new process. We certainly can go back into the files and have a look and see who was contacted, but to state that every vendor in the town of Taber was made aware 2 years ago, I don't know. There could be new vendors in the town of Taber who have come up since, right? So that can't be guaranteed. But when we went through the process a couple of years ago with the change, we did do quite an extensive telephone fan out, and I think there were letters sent. I'd have to confirm if there was letters sent or not, but it was quite the soap opera. I remember it. And we did perform due diligence in making sure that going forward the local vendors were aware that we were undertaking this new process.
Councillor Towns.
And this new process we undertook, and I totally know what you're doing, and council did encourage administration to go this, because Councillor Garner, myself, and John from Finance, not at last AUMA, but the AUMA before, sat in on a presentation from the RMA and the AUMA on their purchasing thing, and that this was all joining together. And I had brought it back to council as a suggestion to look into it. So I like the program. It's a great program. But I have some concerns when we're spending $100 and some thousand on a tractor that we have not, you know, my biggest concern is, have we cut out the ability of a vendor in our town to participate? And that's my reservation. And do I like the program? Do I think there's great benefits? I do. Does it save you a pile of time? I guarantee you it does. I understand that full well. But it is, you know, we are representing the citizens of the town of Taber, also the businesses that operate in this town. And in my mind, we need to be assured that we have given our local vendors every opportunity to be involved. That's my concern.
Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, actually, Councillor Tama, you brought this to us last year, and we thought it was a great deal. But this is a local vendor. It's Rocky Mountain Equipment. So I think we've found the best deal through this, and I think it's a good deal, and I'm prepared to make a motion at this time.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I say council approves the purchase of the 2019 Case tractor from Rocky Mountain Equipment in the amount of $137,000, exclusive GST, as per the guidelines established to the RMA Capital Purchasing Program.
All right, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 6.3, tender award, 52nd Street sanitary and water replacement. Mr. Armfield?
Yes, the two members of administration in the hot seat and stay there and discuss the next item for tender award.
All right, Ms. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Armfeldt. So on February 13th, the Town of Taber solicited an invitation to tender for this work scoped and defined by MPE Engineering to do work on the 52nd Street sanitary and water replacement. A pre-bid meeting was held on February 20th at the 52nd Street and 62nd Avenue, and it was darn cold, I'll tell you that. The tender closed at 2 p.m. on February 28th, and a public opening was held at the Town of Taber Administration Building at that time. Tenders were received by 8 companies, all were responsive and responsible. Upon review of the tenders, we found arithmetic errors on 2 of the submitted bids, and but these errors did not affect the overall low bid result. The following summarizes the corrected tenders received from lowest to highest, and the tender amounts do include a 10% work allowance, a 5% tree replacement allowance, and 5% GST. So just a reminder, GST is included. So the corrected amounts: Elite Site Services out of Black Diamond, $803,362.78. UG Excavating out of Calgary, $895,620.92. Ground Tech Enterprises from Taber, $929,852.28. McNally Contractors out of Lethbridge, $1,021,264.76. Tallstrip Construction out of Lethbridge, $1,258,054.31. Industrial Backhoes out of Medicine Hat, $1,357,351.28. BYZ Enterprises out of Medicine Hat, $1,512,462 even. PME Incorporated out of Okotoks, $1,600,426.80. Elite Site Services has provided the proper bonding, insurance, and safety qualifications, and MPE Engineering has worked successfully with Elite Site Services in the past on similar projects of this nature, even though the Town of Taber hasn't.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Chavez?
Yes, Your Worship, to Lee's here. I find this kind of strange that a company would have a $17,000 error on a bidding process. I mean, that's a pretty penny of a stroke of a penny. Like, are these not computerized? Do they not come out and fall out of their system? Like,
so they don't. What they do is they provide. We list all the different line items with all the different breakdown of what makes up these prices. We ask them to enter, and we have quantities. We ask them to enter the amounts, their per unit prices on each of these, and then they fill in the amounts. So on the Elite Site Services, as an example, their total number that they came to on theirs was actually $803,362.78. And by the time they transferred it to their cover page, which says total lump sum in dollars, it changed to $820 million or $820,000.
We don't know why.
No, don't know why.
Pages going up and moving that number.
Yeah, move the number from this page to this page, and it changed.
But they're all together for the $803,000.
yeah, I understand that. It just seems kind of strange that.
I know. I tried to figure out whether they had added in the allowances twice, or how they actually ended up at that, and they didn't.
All right, Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Parsons, what exactly is a 10% work allowance? Is that a done deal, or is that just a...
No, it's not. It's owner directed. Anytime we have a work allowance, they're owner directed. It's when they are working in something and they end up with something that's unforeseen. And so they have to do a change order. Everything is managed by change order, and it's something they didn't discover when we were speccing the project.
Mr. Mayor, as a follow-up though, is that quite a common fact in these type of projects?
Every tender has a contingency fund.
I understand that, sir, but 10% seems a little high.
Not on something you're rehabbing, that's worth $1 million. It's not bad. Take, for instance, the auditorium, we went up to 20% because it was a rehab. The more work unknown that's under the ground, the more contingency fund you should actually have.
And typically you would start at about 10 and then go up or down based on the complexity of the job.
All right, thank you. Yes.
I'm not saying we're going to use this. This is only the case of we find something that's unknown. This money would come back to the reserves if unused. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, okay, Mr. Chair, I understand that, but isn't there a danger when the owner allows 10%, contingency you call it, and of course the bidder knows this because it's built into his bid, that he's going to use it anyway somehow?
No, not when we're on site managing the project.
Okay, thank you.
We have to approve any change orders.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Brew.
a question, if I may. With the 10%, that's all of the contractors are aware of that, so they're all figuring that in on their bids. The only concern I would have is if Elite Site is familiar with the ground service or conditions in Tabor and they're aware of all the.
We did an extensive geotechnical report that was part of the bid process, so everybody was aware of what's in the ground, what kind of moisture content, what type of soil is there, everything else.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Beckering.
Mr. Mayor, I'm very satisfied with the answers given so far. I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right.
I'll move, Mr. Mayor, that council awards the 52nd Street sanitary and water replacement tender to Elite Site Services in the amount of $803,362.78, GST included.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Item 6.4, electronic tablets for Tabor Municipal Police Commission. Mr. Armfield.
Yeah, this one has come forward from the Municipal Police Commission. There was a tablet that has been requested, and we are likely in the position of having to buy a minimum 2 tablets. As you can see by the report that Council had passed in 2018, the intent to purchase tablets for the Municipal Police Commission. We actually only bought 1 at that point in time. We are actually looking to buy 2 for certain at this point in time, and this will give us the opportunity before the end of 2019, if any other member of the Police Commission wants to also have a tablet to outfit everybody with an iPad on the Police Commission if they so choose. But we're certainly looking at having to buy 2 in the short term.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Tams?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion that council approves the request to purchase electronic tablets for the members at large on the Tabor Municipal Police Commission for no more than the value of $2,600 from the council discretionary fund.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.5, pet trade of exotic species. Mr. Armfield.
Yes, we received this letter. All of council and administration received this letter probably about 2 weeks ago, lobbying for a change to our a bylaw or a new bylaw to be put in place with regards to the trade of exotic species. We had a conversation. You asked to have it put on the council agenda package, so we have done so council can have a discussion and provide administration with some direction on this matter.
Thank you. Any questions whatsoever? Councillor Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't be less interested.
All right, it's fair enough. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Brown?
I have to agree with Mr. Beckering on this. I don't think we need to make a change in our bylaw, but I appreciate her concerns with some illegal trading of exotic animals. But if you want to tell our neighbor that you can't have a parrot, or actually our Chinese ring-necked pheasant is actually an exotic animal imported into Canada. So, no, I believe there's no changes needed.
All right, anything else? Councillor Thames.
I happen to agree with both gentlemen, and I actually think this is more a provincial matter than it is a local bylaw.
All right. Simply just a requirement to accept his information then, Mr. Armfield, would be suffice.
Yes, that would close the loop.
Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the motion to accept this for information.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.6, social media public engagement. Mr. Armfield.
Yes, on our quest to update all of our policies and rid the municipality of policies we don't use, we have about a half a dozen here to run through with council this afternoon. Would somebody from IT like to take this one on? Alla, would you like to present the facts of this one? Or is this, this is Miss Brennan? Miss Brennan. Okay. Yes.
I'm sure Al would love to come up and talk about my policy, but I'll save him the trouble.
Might have been a more interesting conversation.
All right. Good afternoon, Council. So this is the policy that any user for the Town of Taber social media profiles uses as sort of a public engagement terms of use, as the policy would say. We're recommending no changes at this time, only because it's served its purpose for the past few years that we've held it in place, and it's worked quite well for us. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have regarding it.
All right, thank you. Any questions whatsoever? Councillor Thames?
No, I don't have a question, just a comment. I think it's a great policy, and with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion. That council approves the social media public engagement terms of use policy ADM-8 as presented.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.7, encroachment agreement and policy and procedure. Mr. Armfield.
Now I'll take another chance at this. Yes, I see Miss Monks moving towards the microphone, but Miss Noble just walked in to add,
Good.
I didn't know.
She's the one in the know.
Okay, go ahead, Miss Monks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So administration continues its review of current policies and procedures and ensuring they're up to date. Planning has reviewed the encroachment agreement policy and its associated procedure and has made amendments in order to keep it consistent with overarching legislation as well as existing execution of the procedures. So the intent of the procedure itself has not changed. Any encroachment exceeding 0.3 meters, which is just under a foot, would still be brought forward to council for approval. Any encroachment under that can be signed off by the CAO. The procedure and policy have been working effectively and there have been no concerns or issues. So administration would recommend approval for another 3-year period.
Thank you. Any questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the council accepts and approves the updates to the encroachment agreement policy and procedure PLN-03.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.8, acceptable use of information technology resources. Mr. Armfield.
Yes, now we get the grace of Mr. Abdel Khalik to talk about this one. Please, sir, go ahead.
Oh.
So another policy that's outdated, and I would like to review it with council. And we have now a new number that meets our new structure of policies. Not many changes. If council have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Any questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Garner.
I can make that motion. The council approves the revised acceptable use of information technology resources policy CS-IT-6 as presented.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. It's an easy one, Al. All right. Item 6.9, new violence prevention policy. Mr. Armfield.
The occupational health and safety legislation has changed such that we had workplace harassment and violence under one policy heading, and the Occupational Health and Safety Act has changed such that you had to separate these two policies legislatively. So you have in front of you HR manager Mr. Dave Dusky, and actually the chairman of our harassment committee, Chief Munshaw, to present these two for council.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, council members, your worship. Two policies I'd like to present. One is the new workplace violence prevention policy and the new workplace harassment prevention policy. So these two policies replace our current workplace violence and anti-harassment policy. The new changes come about as a result of the Occupational Health and Safety Act that was changed in 2018 that requires employers to separate those two items into separate policies. In the past, many of employers have combined those two issues into one policy. Now they're asking it to be separated in two separate policies. The Harassment Committee has reviewed these policies and the changes and recommends that Council adopt them.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move that Council adopts the Violence Prevention Policy CS-HR-11 as presented.
And sir, please, if we can do exactly what Councillor Firth has indicated, which is separate all three items as their own motions, please.
Three separate motions, correct.
Please.
All right. All right. Motion number one, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Motion number two, Councillor Garner.
Council adopts the workplace harassment prevention policy CS-8-HR-12 as presented.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Motion number three, Councillor Strauss.
That Council repeal the current workplace violence and anti-harassment policy CS-HR-7.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Item 610, health and safety policy. Mr. Arnfield.
Yes, and Mr. Dusky is going to stay put because he ultimately manages our health and safety program here at the town. This one's coming through for its regular yearly checkup. This one has to be endorsed by council once a year, and so that's why it's in front of you this afternoon.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, so this policy has an annual review component. So this year's review has seen some changes to the policy, again, as a result of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, new things that came about in 2018. The changes are highlighted in yellow for you, and those are the addition of the employee's psychological and social well-being, in addition to the 3 R's, that is the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to refuse unsafe work.
Great, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that in accordance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Town of Taber endorses the Municipal Health and Safety Policy C-4 for 2019 and approves the signing of this document by the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? Sorry, Councillor Becker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, Mr. Dave. Unsafe, judgmental, subjective.
Yes.
If I say to you it's -20, I feel it's unsafe. I won't work outside. What's your response?
Yes. There has to be a bona fide occupational reason for the objection, I guess, right? So if we can give you proper PPE to work in that environment, if we can reduce the hazard, then you need to comply and do the work, right? So you can't just object because the work is messy and it's dirty and you just feel it's unsafe. You have to have a bona fide reason for that, right? So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. All right, once again, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 611, accounts receivable, collections, and write-offs. Mr. Arnfield.
Yes, Mr. Orwaz, present the material here on this one, please.
Mr. Orwaz.
Thank you, members of council. So we do have this particular policy. Again, we're just revising this policy, and there are very, very minimal changes to this policy. The only change that is out there is just referencing the Director of Cooperative Services and changing it to Director of Finance. Otherwise, the content remains the same.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Garner.
I can make that motion, Mr. Mayor. that council approves the revised accounts receivable collections and write-offs policy number CS-FIN-4 as presented.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.12, payments, refunds, and cash legal tender policy. Mr. Arnfeld?
Yes, again to Mr. Orwa to review the changes, please.
Yes, for this particular policy, again, the same reference, Director of Corporate Services replaced, been changed to Director of Finance. The only change or added to this policy is we've added, the transfer station now to accept credit card payments. Otherwise, the rest of the policy remains the same.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Tams?
Question, Bert, make a motion.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, move that council approve the revised payments, refunds, and cash legal tender policy CS-FIN-5 as presented.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Good, thank you. Item 6.13, policies proposed for repeal. Mr. Arnfeld?
Yes, we have our own omnibus bill here coming forward. Though I think each one of these needs their own motion. Is that correct? Yeah. So again, each one should have its own motion. There are 6 of them that were very much legacy policies that are no longer used at all.
All right, thank you.
So the first one, number 1, WCB inquiries policy. The specifics of this policy are included in the Workers' Compensation Act and also within the town's disability management program. So there's no need for the policy itself. Number 2, personal information protection policy. The principles covered in this policy are also covered in the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, the FOIP Act, which we follow, of course. Number 3, the hepatitis B staff immunization policy. This policy has been replaced with a vaccine information statement handout that is given, and it's dealt with on a case-by-case situation and per the employee's position. Some are higher risk than others. Flu staff immunization policy. Alberta Health Services offers free immunization for any resident in the town of Taber annually who wish to get immunized, so no need for that policy as well. Number 5, coveralls and boots policy. The particulars of this policy are covered within our collective agreement, particularly Article 24 and 25. And number 6, the accrued vacation policy, as well as covered in our collective agreement by Article 19 as well. So.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? All right, Councillor Beckert.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council repeals WCB inquiries policy number 80S-8596.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 2, Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council repeals personal information protection policy.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 3, Councillor Chavez.
Council repeals hepatitis B staff immunization policy number 54-10-23-95.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 4, Councillor Tams.
Mr. Mayor, move that council repeals flu staff immunization policy number 60/10/13/98.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5, Councillor Garner.
The council repeals coveralls and boot policy number 34S-810623.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6, Councillor Firth.
Move that council repeals accrued vacation policy number 62C-535/10/9/98.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item 6.14, standing item council requests. Mr. Arnfeld.
Yes, this is the opportunity that council gets to ask administration any questions they may wish, or give us some direction through the form of a motion.
All right. Thank you. Anything come up? Nothing new on the horizon. All right. And our standing items, there was the one I believe was coming off, Mr. Armfeld.
Yes, I believe. Yeah, the last one on the from February the 11th. The motion there to speak with the Royal Canadian Legion. Council has been apprised of that discussion through my weekly report.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no new direction, we don't require any motion in that regard, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So we will move on to delegations. There are no delegations in open session. Number 8, media and inquiries. Tabor Times, Trevor.
This would be in relation to your February 11th resolution that's passed all in Canada to fully compensate your salaries for the change in federal tax exemption. I realized this was in closed session, but I interviewed your profile last week, and he was able to give me some information, but he was unable to pass on what the financial implications of that would be, at least forward. So I contacted him from administration, seeking that information as well, but they were, in fairness to them, reluctant to provide that information to me because it was discussed in Canada. So I'm just wondering if I can get the preliminary information on the budget increase prior to the matter coming up before the budget amendments.
All right. Mr. Armford, can I refer that to Mr. Orwa at this stage?
Ultimately, it should be a council motion that all of council agrees that you're directing administration to provide information out of a closed session to any member that wasn't here during the closed session discussion. So that would be direction that we would get from council as a whole.
All right, Councillor Becker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me that information coming in a closed session regarding budget implications, like Mr. Bush requested, I think is perfectly proper, but I think we should leave it at that, though. I don't think Mr. Bush should get all the information coming out of a closed session.
All right, any other questions? Comments? I guess just a clarification, Mr. Armfield, I believe, as I understand this, there is likely something coming forward with some other budget information that we don't have yet, correct?
Not necessarily on this item. We will be discussing, well, the first part of that conversation is actually going to be at the end of March, and then in the beginning of April to talk about where the assessment is at, because it has come in lower as we expected, and there is an implication to the tax rate. But for the portion of the financial impact and the percentage increase to keep the council salaries at par, giving the change to the legislation, the tax legislation, that is in hand, and that's going to be a constant. Right. We know the percentages and we know the value of that. Is that correct, Mr. Orwa? Yes. So that can be provided, and I believe that is the information that the Tabor Times is looking for. However, your administration would like to have that passed by a motion, that information is passed publicly.
All right. Sure. That sounds fair enough. And I think in fairness to the Tabor Times, Trevor, I believe we discussed that, and that I didn't have that complete information. I didn't want to give you inaccurate information, so I think we're on the right track here with where we're going with this. Councillor Beckering.
Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that the Tabor Times that the media be supplied with the budget implication regarding the recent decision by council regarding council remuneration.
All right. Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Good, thank you. Any other questions, Trevor?
Yes.
Okay.
Just in relation to Resolution 90, 2019, that was passed following ECAM on February 25th. So the town has then moved to purchase the site from Emergency Services Authority.
All right, that's correct. I'm not sure, is that the correct Motion and numbers we're discussing here.
There was a condition attached to that motion, yes, but that has identified a site. And there, attached to that motion, there was a condition that it was subject to a suitable tender, I believe. Satisfactory tender.
Correct. Right. So that came out publicly as soon as we came out of the closed session with that information. Correct.
Yes, the site can be identified by the lot, block, and plan.
Right.
And there's the information session coming up on the March 21st.
Could you guys tell me then what that location is in the community, what the street address?
I believe we could say that. Absolutely. Yeah. Sure. I don't have that address.
Okay.
So
yes, I certainly can. So it's the post office building. The 6 lots 1 to 6, encompass the post office, and the lot to the east of the post office. There's an empty lot there. So from the TELUS building west to the street.
Okay. So are you guys able to tell me then what the purchase price of that property was? Or will be?
Mr. Arbor, I guess at this stage everything's pending, correct, as far as the conditions attached to that.
Yes, and contract information is usually not shared.
Right.
There certainly will be a discussion at that information session about what the purchase value is going to be, and how council may choose to fund that purchase. So that will come forward. But the actual terms of the contract are generally not shared. But the transparency of the budget implication to that will certainly come forward and be discussed at the 21st. Yep.
Okay. I'm just going to keep so I guess that means that property would be demolished then, the post office?
That is not what we were looking at all.
Oh, what am I hearing?
There's a vacant lot
Between the
TELUS building
and the
post office.
Okay.
So that vacant lot is
Sorry, I misheard.
that's the interesting piece of the puzzle, that vacant lot. Yeah.
Okay.
And the post office has come along for the ride.
Okay. I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. With that, I just ask for a motion to take the 30-minute dinner break, please.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Towns, motion on the table. All in favor? Carried and answered. Thank you.
session, and then they're going to pass a motion.
All right, could I have a motion to reconvene the meeting, please? Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And I would need a motion to go into closed session, please. Councilor Bruin?
I'd like to make a motion. We move into closed.
Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Shut the doors.